Hi, John with Mayco here. Today I'm going to show you just exactly how well both of our crystal glaze lines, Jungle Gems and Crystal Lights, play well with all the other Mayco glaze line. So today we're going to be focusing on, of course, the crystal glaze, but in addition to that, the other Mayco products you're going to need to have on hand will be our clay carbon paper, some stroke and coat, black accent, foundation sheer, and we're going to do a little bit of stamping with our stroke and coat using our designer stamps and our sponge on a stick. So get ready to paint along and have a really exciting time seeing just how you can use crystal glazes in yet another fun way. So the first thing we need to do is transfer our frog design onto your bisque piece. So we're going to be using our clay carbon. We're going to set that directly against the bisque. Make sure you have it facing the right direction. There is a right and a wrong side, so it's a good idea to test it on the piece just to make sure that I'm facing the right direction. I'd hate for you to go through all the work of tracing having the paper the wrong way. So then I'm going to take my pattern, and this can be any kind of drawing or printing or anything off of our website, and I'm lining this up with the clay carbon. So clay carbon acts just like regular carbon would act. Now I'm going to go over those pattern lines using a ballpoint pen, and I'm going to press rather firmly to be sure that I get a good transfer. Now don't worry about being perfect with this. There's going to be additional steps for you to correct any minor imperfections, and the clay carbon lines are going to burn away during firing, so they are not permanent at all, so you don't have to live with something you may not like. So once you get the entire pattern traced, we're going to be doing some stamping. So it's important that we come back and reinforce those lines, because if I were to stamp right over my tracing that are left behind with the clay carbon, it would be lost. So here's a tip for you. Go over your traced lines using a water-based marker, something a bright color. Red works really good, and just go right over all those clay carbon lines so that we'll be able to see them when we go on to the next step of stamping. Now we're ready for the next step by using Mayco's designer stamps with Tuxedo Stroke and Coat. So I'm going to dispense a little bit of our Stroke and Coat right onto my palette, and then we're going to be using the designer stamp's best friend, which is the sponge on a stick. Now my tip for you is to make sure that the sponge on the stick is completely dry when you start, because if there's water in the sponge, it's going to add water to your color and dilute it. We want to use it full strength to get the strongest stamping possible. So the way we're going to load this sponge on a stick is I'm going to sneak up on this little puddle and drag a little bit of it out, and then start pouncing straight up and down. This kind of simulates using a stamp pad. So I'm going to fully saturate my sponge evenly with Stroke and Coat. Get a little bit more here so that the whole thing is covered. See how the whole sponge surface is covered with Stroke and Coat. Now because the sponge on the stick is a flat surface as well as the stamp, we want to make sure when you're inking your stamp it's flat on the surface you're working. Don't ever pick it up in your hand and try to ink it. Keep it nice and flat on your tabletop. That way when the ink surface comes in contact with the raised part of the stamp, all you'll be inking is, in this case, the leaf area of the stamp. And you're going to pounce this straight up and down so that all of the beautiful design of the stamp gets fully charged with, in this case, Stroke and Coat, but let's just call it ink. So we're inking up our stamp fully with Stroke and Coat. So I get it all covered. And I go over it several times to be sure that I don't miss anything. And then working rather quickly, I'm going to take my tile back here that has our red ink on, and I'm just going to set this directly on my tile right over that design that I've drawn. Press down firmly, make sure all the surface comes in contact, and then peel it away. Then you're going to repeat this stamping process until your entire tile is covered with stamping. Alright, for the next step, we're going to be outlining all of those red lines we did with the marker using Mayco's Stroke and Coat Accent Black. So let me show you quickly how to prepare this bottle so it will work the best for you. So you're going to pop off this little plastic cap, set it to the side. Now this little plastic tip needs to be opened up. We don't sell it to you with the already been punctured because that's going to add to the shelf life of this product. So I've got our little metal writer tip. The stainless steel tip comes along with this bottle. You're going to set it down on your tabletop, and then you're going to take your bottle and you're going to invert it. You're going to turn it upside down and just set it on the tip and then push down until you hear a little popping sound. Now we're not finished yet. We're going to then slowly push down about maybe a third of the way or a quarter of the way down the cone just to open up that hole a little bit. And that's always better than taking a scissor and cutting it. Inevitably you'll end up making it too large. So then we can just take this writer tip, and it's a pressure fit, so you're going to just push down and give it a slight twist, and that'll attach itself right to the end of the nozzle of this accent bottle. So now we need to get inside here and stir this product up thoroughly. So accents can be opened up easily so that you can control the viscosity or the thin or thickness of this product. So I'm going to take a little stir stick and I'm going to get right down in this bottle and I'm going to give it a stir to incorporate any of the waterhead that might be on the surface and just really mix it up. And just by agitating this or mixing this, it's going to break it down to a beautiful thinner consistency so that it's going to flow right out of that writer tip for you. Alright, we'll get it nice and mixed. And then I'm going to put the cap back on and we're ready to start writing. So let's get our piece in front of us ready to start using the accent. And remember, accent is dimensional. It'll be slightly raised. So this is going to create the perfect little wall or a dam that's going to contain our glazes when we drop them into place later. So you're just going to go right over all of those red lines that you created with your marker and leave a nice raised design. Now we want this to be fairly thick because we want it to look like, think of the lead in a stained glass window. We're not looking for it to be super thin. We want there to be some heft to these lines. So you're going to go over all of the lines. The tip is actually touching the surface, or you can be slightly above it like this and just let that product just fall out. So whichever way you're comfortable with, you can get a nice raised dimensional line or dam using accent. Now the fun really begins. We're going to be using different glazes, crystal glazes as well as some sheer to complete our project. Now if you look and see, now that my accent is dry, that is a nice raised dimensional dam to contain our glazes so they won't run into one another. So we're going to start off with the crystal glaze. We're going to be using pagoda green. Now at the bottom of the jar you can see all those crystals are hanging out, so it's really important that we get in there and stir it thoroughly. So shaking is not enough. So we need to get in there with some sort of a stir stick, palette knife, or even the back end of a paintbrush. So you get down in here and really thoroughly combine the crystals with the glaze. Now a tip for you, whenever you're using a Jungle Gem or a Crystal Light glaze, because they're a non-toxic formula base, the minute I stop stirring this, these crystals are going to want to start sinking to the bottom again. So to make sure that we get crystals in every brush full, I'm going to pour some of this out onto a flat surface and kind of trick the glaze so that when I dip my brush in, instead of trying to sink down to the bottom of the jar, the crystals are nice and handy so that I can find them as I'm applying them. So you're simply going to load up your script liner brush, really nice and full with color, and I'm fishing around here looking for some crystals, and you want to make sure you include them. And you're just going to drop this in, a generous amount of glaze, and then I'm kind of using the brush to kind of scoot that glaze around so I'm forming a nice puddle of this glaze. This way I'm only needing to apply one generous coat. See those little crystals in there? So make sure that they're in every brush full. So by working on this flat surface, I can scoop my brush around and find them. See, where are you? It's like fishing here. So there, I'm going to scoop one up, scoop them up, and drop them in place, and then scoot that glaze around. Now remember, these crystals are going to bloom open quite much bigger, so don't feel like, boy, I'm not getting enough crystals, I better go back in and jam some more in. They're going to be there after firing. So I'm using the pagoda green on the frog's body. You would then come back in and use Yadro print on the branch that he's clinging to, and even drop some of the red stroke and coat the same way I'm using this crystal glaze in his eyes. Now the last painting step is we're going to do a backgrounding. We're going to be featuring one of our sheer foundation glazes. This one's dry champagne. Sheer glazes, just as the name implies, this stamping that I've done on the background will shine right through this glaze, but the dry champagne is a beautiful creamy off-white tone, so it'll allow that stamping to pop right through. Now I'm going to use the soft fan brush here, and I'm actually going to brush this on. Scoot it right to the edge of my accent glaze, and I'm just going to brush this out smoothly, and I'm going to apply 2 coats so that the entire background of your planter, or in this case my tile, will be completely covered with glaze. Now we need to allow each of these coats to dry enough that I don't disturb my previously applied coat. You're going to apply 2 coats just to that background, not over your crystal glazes. So now that your piece is finished and it's been fired to shelf cone 05, 06, you can see that the crystals have bloomed open and they reveal all those colors that you couldn't see very well in their raw stage. You can see the brilliance of the stroke and coat, and as I said, the foundation sheer allows that stamping to show through nice and clear.